Hello, everybody. Happy International Women's Day. Lisa and I are really, really excited to be here. I'm Dinah, and I'm the VP of R&D Operations at Arctic Wolf, and also the founder of Code Like a Girl, an online publication for women in tech. And Lisa is our Senior Director of Security Operations. And I've had the pleasure of working with Lisa for, I think, like at least 3 years, maybe even four. I'm not even sure. So we banded together to put this talk together for you all, and we're gonna dive in. We're gonna start with us talking through our stories a little bit. So, what I want to start with is how I found security, and what we're talking about today is like how women in general have found security and what it's like in it. So, I was this like very naive little 17, yes, that's me at 17, very fresh-faced looking. And that's my high school graduation picture. And I really loved math. I really loved math and calculus and science. And so when I went to my high school counselor to see what I should do as a career, he was like, well, you should be a math teacher. Because I'm a woman. And then, like, if you're good at math and you're a woman, then you should be a teacher, right? No, but I was really naive. And, maybe if that's what you like, but none of the guys got that suggestion. They got, you should go into engineering, you should do whatever. And so I did believe them, and I went to the University of Lethbridge that has this amazing 2-degree program where in 5 years you can get a teaching degree and your bachelor's. And I very quickly realized that in the class where we would actually spend some time with children, that I actually enjoyed the mathematics more than the children. And I actually wanted to learn more about mathematics. And so I decided not to pursue the career as a teacher. And I was just doing my math degree. Then I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do for work after this? And in my third year, I finally took the required computer science course. All of my friends in humanities and so political science and all of that, some of them had taken the course and they're like, it's so hard, Dinah. It's so hard. So I'd like put it off because I was worried about it. And I think within like minutes of being in that very first class, like I can still remember the feeling of that lecture hall where I sat with the teacher or the professor, I should say. And I just remember thinking like, this person's just describing how I think. This is just a different syntax for how I think. Like computer science is like a real life version of mathematics. This is amazing, right? And so that's where my love of computer science came. And the way that I got into cybersecurity was I was now going, okay, well, what am I going to do? It's the late 90s. It was the late 90s then. And I needed to find a job. So I joined the co-op program with my university. And there was this posting from the government saying that they needed a mathematician that could code. And I was like, oh, hands up, that's me. That's me. This is really interesting. What do they want me to do? And when I got there, it turned out what they wanted me to do, and this really does date me, is implement the Bluetooth algorithm from the spec so that they could evaluate how good the security of Bluetooth was. At the time, the Canadian and American governments were evaluating new algorithms to be used as the AES standard, moving away from triple DES, and they eventually chose Bluetooth. And what we discovered was, Bluetooth is really not secure. Like not secure at all, but has a lot of great applications in our world today, right? But this is where I discovered cybersecurity and specifically cryptography. And I loved that it was this mix of mathematics and computer science and real world applications. And so after my co-op terms, I went back to school for my last year of university, and I went and talked to some of my professors, one of my male professors, and I said, "Look, you know, I'm considering going to graduate school in cryptography. What advice do you have?" And you know, the guy looked at me and he went, "Well, what's your GPA?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a 3.8 out of 4." She knows it's not a bad GPA. He's like, "Well, I guess." And so I was a little bit discouraged, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe I should just go and try and find a job." And then I met Dr. Shelley Wismath in the hallway. She's was one of my computer science professors, and I kid you not, her husband is a math professor, and their last name is Wismath. It's unbelievable. But I had taken a number of courses from her, and she stopped me in the hallway and she said, "Dinah, I don't see an NSERC application for you. I don't see an application for a scholarship to go to graduate school." And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't think I should go." And she's like, "What is your GPA?" And I'm like, "It's a 3.8 out of 4." She's like, "Clearly you can go to grad school. I would like to see that application as soon as possible." And I was like, "Well, I guess I'm going to grad school." And, so I applied to the University of Calgary, and I applied to the, in my mind, outlandish goal of going to the University of Waterloo, where all the crypto gods were, like Alfred Menezes and Scott Vanstone and Doug Stinson, who all wrote like books that I had done like, you know, learning from. They owned like they created algorithms and everything. And I'm like, I'll never get in here, but I might as well apply. Well, turns out I was wrong. I did get in there, and I did get to go to the University of Waterloo and get a master's degree in cryptography, which I really enjoyed. I did quickly kind of discover that I didn't want to get a PhD though, and I was ready to, you know, leave academia. And so by the time I was done that degree, it was end of 2003, and it was post bubble burst. And it was actually really hard to find a job in software development. And I was really lucky because I had gone to a conference that summer that was at the University of Waterloo, but I had met a whole bunch of guys from BlackBerry, and I, you know, had dinner with them. I thought, by the way, I thought it was really weird when we were at dinner that none of them were talking and they were all on their phones clicking away on their Blackberries. I didn't even have a cell phone then, but if you think about today, that's like that's like a normal thing, but it was like so foreign at the time, because like barely anybody had Blackberries or any smartphone at all then. And so when I was looking for a job, I actually was finding it difficult. And I was walking to school one day, and in the parking lot, I ran into a co-op who had been a co-op on that security software team in the previous summer. And he's like, "How's it going?" I'm like, "Well, actually not that great. Like, I'm trying to find a job. I'm graduating right away." And he's like, oh, here's my email. Send me your resume. I'll pass it along to my previous boss. And that is how I got my foot in the door, and was one of the first people hired after their hiring freeze from the bubble burst. And it's how I got my dream job, like basically right out of university. I was able to join what was called the crypto dev team at BlackBerry, and we were wholly responsible for the security of Blackberries from everywhere from above the OS level up, in anything we connected to desktops, to the backend servers, everything. And we were like 5 people. And so that meant that I got to ride this amazing ride that was BlackBerry, and we were fundamentally a key part of that product. We got to live on what we often called the bleeding edge of wireless cybersecurity. And it was a great time. And so I was really fortunate, but it was a really windy route to get there. And I don't think that that's unusual, especially for women, but I don't know. Let's see what Lisa, let's talk a little bit about your experience. How did you get into cybersecurity?
Thank you, Dinah. So my cybersecurity journey started back in the 90s as well. I started with dial-up modems. My father had brought home a computer. He was in a systems role, and I thought it was pretty cool. I got to play some games. What I knew at that time, much like you, Dinah, was that I was very strong at math. So I started my undergrad at Western in math. I was a math major, and I had a computer science elective. And I loved the concepts in the computer world and not so much in the math world. So let me tell you what happened with me. Um, I ended up having to change my major because I realized in my first year that while I was very, very good at math, I had zero passion for it. And I just couldn't imagine myself doing anything except teaching. And much like you, Dinah, I liked the concepts better than I liked interacting and really sharing. I couldn't share my knowledge as well as I should, I guess. So I felt like I was going to be doing a disservice if I followed that path. So
Yeah.
over to the University of Western, and so I get into this wonderful computer science, and I learned that I loved breaking things, but there's a lot of programming in it. And what I wasn't really finding was, again, I was starting to kind of, I don't know, age out of the programming. I was losing my spark. I was losing my passion there. So I decided at that time I was going to do an internship. And internships were 16 months long. And so I figured if I did this internship, I would realize where it was my passion should be in the computer science field. So lo and behold, I land a role at Canada Trust at the time. TD had not acquired them. And I fell in love with network management and network operations. And to me, it was just wonderful in seeing what it was all about. But before I even got into that role, I had a role when I first got into scripting, and I was bored to tears. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do here? And all of a sudden, from some act of God, I was reorged and ended up in this network space. So I wasn't even in the internship in the role of networking, and I just kind of landed in it. So I loved all things routing, switching, security. And then I went back to school and finished my undergrad. And when I did that, it wasn't until that time that I realized how male dominant it was, because up until that, a lot of the electives had women that were in engineering, which is quite popular at Western for both men and women. And I went and I did my graduation, and I was one of 4 female graduates in a class of 203 students. So
Cheapers.
it didn't feel like that when I was in the program, but it quickly became that way. So I then got my cyber start through different paths, and it was through my career. So over 20 years, what cyber path I kind of went down was at TD Canada Trust. I learned all about risk aversion and operations, the importance of security, and how companies invest in tools when it comes to their operations and security. At IBM, I learned about compliance. I learned about security audits, disaster recovery, the importance of backups, and how to be in a big company. I too also went down the path with BlackBerry. I learned about incident management, how to respond to breaches and operational issues. It was a lot of fun. And then I went to Sandvine. And at Sandvine, I learned how to lead global operations teams. I had staff in 10 different countries, and I learned how to listen to customers and what they were wanting. So it was that operation, theme all throughout. And then I landed at Arctic Wolf, and I had the opportunity and pleasure to build out the SOC that are protecting and responding to customers. I've learned about best practices, the importance of threat intelligence and detections, how to recruit, retain, and scale a team of cybersecurity engineers. And so that was really so much of my journey into cyber here. It took a 20, almost 25-year path.
All right. So is our story unique? Is this path to cybersecurity unique? Like, not at all. And this was a question, that I intuitively thought, no, this is not unique. Like Lisa's story, my story, the story of a lot of my colleagues or friends that I've ran into, you know, seem to go this way. So about a year ago, I wanted to actually get a little bit of data on this. So I built out a women in cybersecurity survey. I sent it out to LinkedIn and a whole bunch of women in cybersecurity groups, and I was very happy with the response. I got over 50 responses, which I thought was pretty good. Survey rates don't usually get a lot when you just like randomly send them out on LinkedIn. So I was pretty happy with that. And I was able to gather some of that data. And so one of the questions, the first question I asked was, is cybersecurity your first career? And, out of all of those people, 75% said no. 75%, which is pretty high, I think. So it's showing that trend, right? And then, I asked them, well, what did you do? What did you do before cybersecurity? Right. And a lot of people were in IT. That was like a bigger, the size of the word here does indicate, how often it showed up in my results. But what I also found was that people have come from very different backgrounds, right? Culinary arts or, chemists or all kinds of different, really different backgrounds. Because I think cybersecurity lends to that. You need a diverse set of people thinking about how hackers and attackers are going to be trying to get through and how to defend it and all of that stuff, right? All right. So I want to go through a couple of examples of this that are not just, Lisa or me. And I want to start with Danielle Kent. I met Danielle a couple of years ago. I've been running something called KW Cybersecurity Meetup. You can all join it if you want to. It's on Meetup. And once a month we do a cybersecurity talk. It's really informal. And before COVID it was actually in person. Now it's just online. And Danielle showed up a number of times because she was just interested. She started her career in chemistry and actually got a PhD in chemistry earlier in her career and was a chemist from about 2005 to 2017. And 2017 is when I actually started the cybersecurity meetup. And I think she was at one of the very first events. And so she decided after, coming to the cybersecurity meetup, reading some articles from Robert Hervach and seeing the potential for job opportunities in cybersecurity to make a shift. She was also feeling like kind of done what she wanted to do with chemistry. And so she decided to go to Triage College. And it worked out for her because in 2021, she was hired at Arctic Wolf as a triage security analyst. So, this is not atypical. I have another one, Tani. She started at the University of Waterloo and has a degree in communications and management studies, which is like nowhere near cybersecurity to start with, right? But she went to Text Now, which is a messaging app company, and over the years started, in customer care, and then moved over to the legal support side and became a fraud analyst as part of that work. And this got her really interested in cybersecurity. So with Tani, she reached out to a friend of mine saying, I'm interested in cybersecurity. Who could I talk to about this? And they sent her to me. I had a nice coffee with her and I'm like, well, I actually think you might be a really great fit for my colleague Lisa's team. And lo and behold, she interviews with Lisa, gets a job, June 2020. She's a triage security analyst. So starts in right, at that entry level role. And at this point, she is now the team lead of one of Lisa's security operations teams. It's just amazing that somebody can make the career shift like this and find what they're really great at and run through it. But I think there's so many places you can come from before you get into cybersecurity. So another question I asked was, how did you even discover cybersecurity, right? Because I remember going through, like, certainly wasn't discussed in high school in my day. And even until I would say about 2017, when WannaCry hit, it wasn't even something that was really discussed outside of IT circles, outside of cyber of computer science or people who worked in tech, right? It was maybe something you thought about, like people knew about spam, but not a lot of that. But then WannaCry hit in 2017, and ransomware basically pushed this to the stratosphere. And probably almost everyone's heard of cybersecurity at this point. But how did people hear about it? And a lot of it was through their job or through family or through news. My favorite by far, and there was more than one person who said, I discovered cybersecurity because I was hacked. And then I wanted to get more into it to understand how I was hacked. And now I want to stop people from hacking. So I really love that train of how some people have made it into cybersecurity. So another question I had was, like, how did you build your skill set, right? And at the time there weren't a lot of formal programs other than SANS. Like certainly when I went through university, you either did like really formal cryptography or you pretty much learned it on the job. Like there's a lot more out there now. So 78% did some form of formal education, which I included as like, an online SANS course or something as well. Almost 70% did on the job learning. 82% self-taught. And I think that's really common with cybersecurity because there's some aspect where you're going to have to just dive in and teach yourself. And then what I found really interesting was, how many people did all three of these things? 43%. That's quite a bit. And there's very few that only did one. There was a lot, I think, of a mix of on the job and self-taught as well. But it was an interesting way to look at things. And another thing that I wanted to ask people was, did anyone help you along the way? I have this theory that, because it's not a well-known career path, or wasn't until, maybe a couple years ago, you would have to get introduced to this in some way. And not only that, but you would actually have to have someone become your advocate in some way, right? So for me, it was Dr. Shelley Wismath, right? Without her push there, I mean, I'm sure I would have an interesting career. I'd be doing something interesting, but I might not be doing what I'm doing today. And so it was important to me to find out, like, how many people had kind of that little push, right? And I think my intuition was correct here. Like, more than 75% of people have had someone who has helped them along the way, that it isn't just their own motivation that has gotten them where they are. And I wanted to like bring up a good example of this from a different perspective, where you have somebody who's really started in academia. So this is Atifa. Atifa got her bachelor's degree in math from Carleton, and then her and I shared an office together when we were in grad school at the University of Waterloo. And instead of like bailing out after their master's like I did, she went on and got her full PhD, and then went on to work as a scientific collaborator at, this is a EPFL as a school. And she was interested in getting some experience in the corporate world and not just staying in academia. And she had applied to a lot of places, but they basically wouldn't take her because, people oftentimes they'll look at a resume, and if it's just full with academia, they're like, well, where's your job experience? Like you can't actually do stuff. You're just, an academic. And I think that's like not a good thing to think, but it is true, right? So she had applied to a job at CIBC and she knew somebody there. And all that person did was took her resume and put it in front of the hiring manager and said, you should look at this lady. I also had that for one of the jobs that I had in life at D2L. Somebody took my resume, put it in front of the manager and said, you should talk to that person, right? And she did the rest. But it just shows how important it is for us who are here, who are in these careers, to help people coming in. Sometimes that is all they need. They just need you to say, please look at their resume. And then they do the rest on their own, right? So she worked there for a good amount of time and then exited that over to Ryerson University. And she's actually the founder and director of the Ryerson Cybersecurity Research Lab, which is really very cool. All right. And so the other question I had was, how many years have you been working in cybersecurity? And my intuition here was that we would have many, many more people, especially women, who have been in the less than 10-year category. One, cybersecurity is definitely bigger and more important now, but like Lisa is saying, like when Lisa graduated her program, she was one of 100. Two of one. What was it, Lisa? I forget now.
I was one of 4 females in
one of
class of 203.
Right. So exactly.
1 in 50.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the amount of women in cybersecurity in the early 2000s was probably, 5%. And so it's interesting. In 2013, there was a study done, and there was only 11% of women in cybersecurity. This is from a North American cybercrime magazine. And that has actually really changed. A lot of work has gone into diversity programs, a lot of work, even just like by people like Lisa and I, who have been in this industry forever, trying to pull more people in. It's starting to work. So by 2019, we have about 20% of women in cyber. And this one's the most interesting for me. With between 2019 and 2021, it moved 5% up to 25% women in cyber, that's amazing. That's really amazing. But the data does show it, right? So more than 50% of people that I surveyed were less than 10 years of experience. Even more than 50% were less than 5 years of experience if you include the students, right? With a fairly small percentage at more than 15 years. The other thing I looked at was like, what is your role? And what's that distribution role by years of, what's the distribution of role by years of experience, right? And Lisa, one of the slides is missing. Just noticed. It's all right. I will just talk it. Sorry, I got distracted because one slide. It's okay. So let's look at, job role by years in the experience. Job role by years in the industry. Okay. So as expected, the less than 5 years, we've got like security analysts, incident response, penetration testing, things that are very much individual contributor roles. And we would expect that, right? In the 5 to 10 year, we see the security analysis job drop off because that is a very entry level role, but incident response stays strong. Now you're starting to see academic and C-suite. The 10 to 15 years, now you've got information security. Now, people typically who put information security mean they're like running, like information security teams for companies. It takes more experience. But yet incident response still there. And I love that all the way through to 15 plus years experience, because it shows, some people really like to stay at that individual contributor level and getting their hands dirty with things. But, the proportion goes down, which is what you would, expect. So, all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the slide that's missing is about the next part of my career. So I'm going to, maybe we'll use this next slide. Lisa, why don't you talk through this slide and then I'll talk through that.
Sure. So according to bcg.com, they dove into the implications of diversity at the leadership level, and I wanted to share that with you. So diversity in the study was considered both gender, identity, race, background, amongst many other pillars to consider. So what it came out with was diverse management teams equate to 19% higher revenues than companies without. So additional revenue compared to a competitor correlating back to diversity is what the data is telling us. Right. So companies that had diverse leadership were 1.7 times more likely to be innovative leaders in their market segments. So another competitive advantage with innovation, but diverse leadership teams also solve problems more effectively and efficiently. So that's good. We've got two reasons why diversity is great. 67% of job seekers say that diversity is important when considering a company. So as an employer, you will develop a better reputation in the market, the more diverse of a leadership team that you have. So finally, 85% of CEOs say having a diverse workforce improve their bottom line. So if you want to have an improved satisfaction with employees, and those employees take care of your customers and then your revenue stream, you can actually see that diversity can be your competitive differentiator across all of those disciplines.
Awesome. Okay. Lisa, I don't know if you just magicked that slide back in, but
I got
thank you. Lisa magicked the slide back in, people. This is why working as a pair is amazing. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about Code Like a Girl. I want to talk about my journey after BlackBerry, because, it changed. So one thing was when I was at the University of Lethbridge getting my undergraduate degree, the school actually had a women to men ratio of 7-1. It was really well known for its teaching program. And I guess at the time, and maybe still today, that's more female leaning. So, there's just a lot of women at the school. But the first time I took a second year or, a more advanced computer science course, I walked into the room and there was 60 people in the room and 2 of us were women. And this is at a school where it's 7-1 women to men. This is crazy. So I remember telling myself by the end of the class, I was going to make a friend, because I knew that to be successful, I needed to work with other people. I'm a collaborator. I like to learn from other people and work with them on assignments and all of that. So at the end of the class, I turned around. There's just like 3 or 4 guys sitting behind me. They clearly all knew each other. And I just like turned around and I'm like, hey guys, are any of you going to work on this assignment? And they looked at me like in shock. So I think they were like way more afraid of me talking to them than I was to talk to them. And you know what? To this day, some of those people are still my friends. And we did do our assignments together, and that was great. But it did really, this was kind of one of the first times where my eyes were really open to the gender diversity issues in computer science. When I got the job at BlackBerry, I was just so grateful to have gotten the job. I was so afraid to rock the boat. And it wasn't even, I don't think, a conscious decision. I realize it now looking back, but I just wanted to be one of the guys. I wasn't going to bring up any kind of gender issues. I wasn't going to talk about being a feminist. I mean, if you talked about being a feminist in the early 2000s, like that could be detrimental. It wasn't the positive thinking is today. And I just was like, no, I'm going to be one of the guys. So it's like I was like, thought I could just skid by and they wouldn't notice I was different. Because that wouldn't be obvious at all. And you know what? I was so lucky though, because the team that I was on at BlackBerry, they were amazing. the person leading it, the teammates I had. And over time, over the 8 years that I spent there, we actually grew. We ended up growing one of the more diverse teams at the company, with at least 6 or 7 women in a team of 35, which is crazy. I know that's numbers not good, but it was good then. But fun times came to an end at BlackBerry, and I left for another job. And I did not realize how good it had been at BlackBerry until I found out how bad it could be someplace else. And within 11 months, my new boss at this new company was able to destroy my self-confidence. I was definitely bullied. I remember going home crying a lot of days, and I was mad. Like it didn't work, and it took a lot of guts for me to leave so quickly, because I felt like I'm not even 11 months. It's not enough. You have to stick this out for a couple of years, right? And I was like, no, I can't. So I really went and looked for a role that was where the culture was really, really good. And because of that, I ended up leaving security for a time. But one of the things I decided when I left that company was that I was never going to be quiet about this again. I never wanted this to happen to somebody else. I didn't want them to think it's okay to have to put up with it. And so that's when I started blogging online. And I started to rebuild my confidence. About the same time as I moved to this new company was when, in the Waterloo region, we started the Women in Tech peer-to-peer group. And I was lucky enough to become one of the leaders of that. And then that connected me with hundreds of other women in the region, and just helped empower me to feel like I'm not alone. There's lots of people here that we can do this. And over time, what happened was I ended up creating Code Like a Girl. First, I created these stickers for this grade 9 event where you go to University of Waterloo, and these grade 9 girls, they come around and talk to you and find out what you can do as a career if you have a degree in mathematics. And so I created these cool little stickers for them on the fly, because I wanted them to have something to take home. And I came up with this idea of Code Like a Girl. I mean, I think there was recently at that time, like the Nike ad, like Run Like a Girl and all of that. And so, after about 3 years at this company, I was really missing cybersecurity. And by the way, the cybersecurity stuff still found me at that company, even though I wasn't in a cybersecurity role. But, it's things you care about, they come back to you. So I joined Arctic Wolf, and came back to security, felt like coming home. And at that time is also when I started to create Code Like a Girl. And really, what I found was there was not a lot of places for me to publish my work. I was on Medium, publishing stories, and I knew that if you could get your story into a publication, it might get more views, and that would push my message further. And I found it very hard. The publications were very picky, and there weren't very many of them. And I was like, well, I wonder what would it take to create a publication? And then I discovered it would take like 3 clicks. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just do that. And then I thought, well, what's better than like my perspective is all the women's perspectives, right? Everybody has a different lived experience. So what's more powerful than my voice is thousands of voices like mine. And how could I amplify those thousands and thousands of voices, right? And so that's how Code Like a Girl got started, with a 3-pronged goal, right? So first goal is like change perceptions of women in tech. And the way that we were going to do that was to support women who are existing in tech, to get younger girls interested in tech, and then to be there for male allies. There's tons of men that wanted to help and support, but they don't know what to do. And one of the amazing things I found with Code Like a Girl is the readership over time is been about 50% female, 50% male, which I think is fantastic. And we have about 40,000 followers. We get about 2,000 views a day, something like that. And it's still going, we're still doing it. So this is where, my passion for creating and supporting the diversity in tech comes from. And then now we'll pretend like Lisa's doing this again, and we're talking about the benefits of diversity. And the reason we're going to go into this is because Lisa has done what everyone talks about doing. Lisa has been able to live, eat, and breathe diversity in such a way that her team is one of the most diverse cybersecurity teams I've ever seen in my entire life. And she would never say it that way, but I'm just so proud of her. And so this is what Lisa's going to talk about. So if you want to know why you should listen to Lisa about how to build diverse teams, this is why. She has done it at a time where it is very hard to do.
Thank you, Dinah. Okay, so I find that there was 3 keys to building a diverse team. So first, you have to acknowledge it's not an overnight exercise. It's a long game. 3 months of sustained effort will not make you successful. It'll start, but it's not going to make you successful. You're not going to get the win. I liken it to a journey of health and exercise. It takes months and years to build that foundation, and it takes a lot of conscious effort, and you need to try different techniques along the way. Second is recruitment. You need to recruit effectively. We'll talk about some strategies in the next few slides, but if you're struggling with diversity within your team or the talent pool that you're looking for, ideally, you need to start looking maybe around in different areas that you haven't historically done. There's some techniques and valuable partnerships that will aid in a diverse pipeline, but you need to consider where you're looking. And then finally, you need to grow and retain that talent. So many leaders believe that their involvement in building female or diverse talent is just a focus on getting the talent in the door. And it's not an easy bake oven. You can't just set it, you can't forget it. If you're not actively fostering and growing that talent, then those team members will leave to places that will invest in them. You do not want the first career discussion with a top female talent in your team to be from an external headhunter, recruiting them to go somewhere else. These conversations matter. They matter now, they matter in the future, they matter for the employee, and they matter to you and your company.
I feel like that's the biggest quote. We should write that down. We should like put it on a nice background. We should share it all over social media, because I think that really hits it home for people. Like, do you really want that first conversation about their career to be from a recruiter? No, you really don't, right?
You really don't. Yeah. So I was talking to a colleague of mine just last week, and we were discussing where he kind of sees the most success when building diverse teams. And he said something that resonated, so I'm sharing it with you all. The ability to retain, not just acquire diverse talent, is fundamental to building a high-performing team. So let me just put it to you this way. If you get diversity right, your measurement is employee retention and employee satisfaction. Okay, so, and I'll show you how. So next slide. Here's a snapshot of 8 of the leaders on my security operations leadership team. 4 have backgrounds in cyber, 4 are non-traditional. So we've got legal, we've got customer success, network, IT, hospitality, military, college grads, security operations specialists. I mean, hiring diversity was very intentional. We looked not only for skills on the resume, but we got into details on what the candidate's potential was, how someone may approach a challenging obstacle or work as a team, or their ownership and accountability. We didn't bring this leadership team in to the roles that they have today and right now. So 7 out of 8 of these team members have had promotions into these roles that they now currently hold, right? Some have had several promotions, but we really hired and cultivated and supported and promoted the talent to be the best potential candidates that they could for their future selves within the company. So building a team like this did not come overnight. It was a lot of intentional work, and we're continuing to build this out. Again, it's not an easy bake oven. I can't just say, hey, this is what success looks like and peace out. You really need to continue to foster and grow that. So what are some diversity builders? Next slide, please. So few things, community. Dinah had mentioned this before, but you really need to get out into the community, attend conferences, connect with candidates and other experienced cyber professionals in the industry. WESIS, as Women in Cybersecurity and CyberJutsu, are dominant organizations that are developing female talent in the cyber world. We partnered with schools. So Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst program from Ryerson in Toronto had an entire cohort of graduates that were mostly women or underrepresented members of the cyber community. They provide a wonderful candidate pool and training. That was what we needed. So we began donating our time to schools, and we were even serving on school advisory boards. We would bring real problems that we were facing in the industry, including diversity issues, to the attention of the schools and partnered with them on solutions to kind of help. We spoke to and attended recruitment events and ended up hiring a ton of qualified candidates. And we also drove our company vision into the community at each of these meetups. Dinah, I know you did a lot with the KW Cybersecurity meetup and the Women in Tech. These are all examples there.
Yeah.
From a networking, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I also think it's really important to note, like one of the things that Lisa's done, and the whole the whole security services organization, is that they've built training programs inside and they recognize when people get certifications. So we know we have this massive deficit in the number of cybersecurity jobs that are open and the available people. And the only way we're going to successfully fill all of those roles is to train them internally. I truly believe that if you're a cybersecurity company and you have not built an in-company training program, you're going to lose out in the next few years. And I think Lisa's team is a great example of this because a lot of her members come in at that entry level and promote up fairly quickly, but that's because there's training, there's mentoring, there's everything that they need to do that. And then what are they going to do? They're going to just leave right away? No, they're going to stay because it's a place where they can grow. Their careers can grow, right? And so we're going to be able to meet hopefully, I mean, we need a lot of people, but meet the needs of what our customers need because we're growing that talent internally.
Mm-hmm. I've had many women reach out to me and connect with LinkedIn as well. So the power of social media, asking who to contact about roles. And I personally take these requests very seriously. And when you're building that community, you end up also having second and third level connections, help advocate for open roles that you have. That is one thing. Another thing that we did when we were building out some of the diversity was we kind of looked at our hiring practices. And I'm going to tell you the secret. It's going to be a real big secret now, but if you are ever in a situation where you are hiring multiple candidates for the same role, you have a fundamentally great opportunity. So let me explain. Hiring several team members for a role meant that we didn't need to have that one perfect candidate. We were able to review the pool of candidates at each hiring cohort, and it enabled us to look at education, experience, and capability. And I've actually had a lot of memorable interviews. I was building out a function, and there was a team member that didn't get the role because there was more qualified candidate that had experience doing what I needed them to do. When that function was built out, we were ready to expand. I actually 1 year later contacted that candidate because I had this memorable interview with her, and I offered her a role, and it was now perfectly suited for her because it still had some growing in the function that I was building out, which allowed her to get experience that she didn't have. And, it really was a game changer for her. She joined us, she was happy, and she's successfully employed with us. We also had to update job descriptions on the builders and kind of like, we had to do a lot there with, entry-level roles shouldn't require a CISSP. From the building, we really had to look for open and safe culture. So I'll give you another example that we had to cultivate. We talked about the tough topics, and we talked about biases. Each person is respected. They have a place, they have a voice. I personally received some tough feedback from a skip level team member that I was challenged on a bias that I had. And two things crossed my mind on that bias. So the first thing is, now that I know better, I can and will do better. So improve myself, and it takes work and effort, and I put in the time, so it will pay off. But second order, that was really what feels safe. If they feel safe enough and respected enough that they can speak their true thought.
Is it who's lost, Lisa or me? Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, well, I'll move it. I'll move it forward then. I didn't know. Sometimes my internet's not good and I can't see the Zoom right now. All right. So, we are definitely stronger together. And that's actually like an internal saying that we have at Arctic Wolf. It's part of our diversity and inclusion groups. We have made sure to create, a safe space for people to talk. The story she was talking about there just meant, her skip level report felt safe enough to be able to bring up a point with her that would not, that the thinking about that, like thinking about giving your second level boss feedback about a bias, you definitely have to feel like you're in a safe space. Hey, Lisa, you're back.
Hi,
All
I'm
right.
back.
So
I'm in
I
Germany. I blame the internet here, I guess.
It's all good. It's all good. So I talked about safe space. I talked about the stronger together. So I'll let you finish up this slide.
Yeah, the last thing was mentorship and training. So as Dinah had mentioned earlier, within the security services team, some rockstar colleagues of mine developed a certification program, and this allowed an in-house way to invest in everyone across the entire organization to be successful in future roles and growth. But then what we did was we built custom development plans or had goals for key contributors and support their growth and career aspirations. I personally connected team members with others in different organizations when they're looking for a change or moving into the next role. It really helped them understand their strengths. So a lot of the women that I've been working with, even they doubt themselves, right? So you need an advocate and an ally that'll help help you realize how valuable you are and where your strengths lie. When we talk a lot about impact that each person wants to make, so when you focus on impacts, it enables us to rally behind that team member and be supportive of what they want to do. And then we were able to enable people to have stretch assignments and grow some of the blind spots that they had with some experts. The last thing I want to talk about on this slide is about offboarding. So don't lose sight of the value of offboarding. So as a leader, you may be disappointed that someone is leaving, but do not let your ego get in the way. I've had many people leave the department or the company over the years. And when they leave, I want them to contact me if they don't love their role or if they want to change in the future, because I've rehired many team members or helped them with their next career step. But I've also had a lot of people be referred to me from those team members, which served as a compliment as far as I'm concerned on how they were showing up for the team. So as a leadership team, we expect each person to kind of control their own journey, but we are 100% personally invested in supporting them as we navigate this. So again, if you get diversity right, your measurement is employee retention, employee satisfaction, and it's all just a happy place to be. So.
Excellent. All right. So part of the survey that I did, I asked women what their advice for other women was, and I've obviously like summarized some of it, but here's some advice from all the women that I pulled from in our group. So one, always be learning. Cybersecurity is forever changing. And it's just something where you need to stay on top of things. My favorite ways to stay on top of things is podcasts. I love listening to, my favorite podcast is Smashing Security, because you get to learn about cybersecurity and it's really funny. So that one, I just enjoy listening to it quite a lot. The Cyberwire, the daily update is great. It's like getting the news at 5 o'clock, like the top of the hour news every day in cybersecurity. And for more in-depth stories, I really like Darknet Diaries. Jack Rhysider's a little campy, so you have to like take that into consideration. But he gets these amazing people to interview, and you learn more about it. And then there's like a couple really great books out there right now that I highly recommend people read. One is The Perfect Weapon from David E. Sanger, and the other would be This Is How It All Ends. And I can't remember This Is How the World Will End. And I can't remember the amazing author. She's really awesome. But it especially right now would give you so much insight into what's happening, unfortunately, in Eastern Europe right now. But yeah, it's those, always be learning. Lisa, do you have any favorite podcasts that you listen to, or ways that you are always learning?
I do the IT World Canada one, and
I'm not sorry.
I do, because it's like a snippet every morning. So that's what I listen to right when I get out of the shower.
I laughed because I was on it every 2 weeks last year. I moved on from it, but I'm like,
Smashing Security, Darknet Diaries. Those are all favorites of mine.
Yeah. If people have favorites of theirs, you can share it in the chat for everybody else. I'm sure everybody would like to pick up some new things. So persist, never give up. And I want to go back to a comment or question that came in at the beginning. I wasn't ignoring it. I was just waiting. So this person asked, I've always said there is no innovation without failure, no movement without failing. And the question is for Lisa and I, do you think being a woman in your room, was there room to make mistakes or fail? Was that considerably smaller? Yes, that is a reality. When there are biases against you, you only have to make the mistake that confirms that bias once. If there's no biases against you, then, you can make mistakes without it being looked at that way. And that's not to discourage you. It means we have to persist, and we have to keep going. We have to show them over time that their biases and their perceptions are wrong. They are just wrong. And this is where, like, I really think, it's where we have to dig down and keep moving. And it's where, Lisa and I talk about it when we need to. We like to be each other's shoulder to cry on whenever we need that to happen. And you should use other women in the industry to do that. But it's also, I get very fierce about it because, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I don't want it to be like this for her. And I think, I thank so much the women that came before me and pushed through this. Like, it was so much worse for them. Right. So I feel like this is one of the things that, I keep doing to help continue to give back. I don't know, Lisa, if you have anything you wanted to add there.
Yeah, I always felt that I was on stage, and if I had a misstep, that, it was going to be significantly worse from, compared to maybe my male peers. But it is perseverance. It shaped who I am. And I'm telling you right now, I worked hard, and I was upskilling. I can tell you all Lisa works
her butt off. Her butt off. My God.
And I felt like I was out to prove something for such a long period of time. And but it's perseverance, and I'm thankful for, again, like you had said, Dinah, people in, trailblazers that came before us, but also the male allies that I now have in my arsenal, right? Mm-hmm. Leaders, industry, and this is a tough business to be in. This is a tough business to be in, but it's so rewarding. Mm-hmm. So rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. You are not an imposter. I think this is like for everybody. I really like that one, and it goes with this one. Okay. So to be in cybersecurity, you do not You do not, listening here, you do not need to eat, sleep, and breathe cyber 24/7. Okay. Neurosurgeons do not do surgeries in their free time. They do other stuff. Uh, like, so I don't know why our industry thinks that if you aren't, doing cyber as your hobby, that you aren't going to be the most successful person. It's totally not true. I don't do cyber as my hobby. I have lots of other hobbies. I do lots of other things. But I'm very serious about my job and what I need to do, and I know what I need to do. So I just, you can be in cyber and not want to just like live in a dark basement with your hoodie on. If you want to do that, go ahead. It's all power to you, but that just is not required. Lisa, anything?
Yeah, I'm very physically active. I have a lot of
Mhm.
fun doing CrossFit, weightlifting. I play baseball and a whole heck of a lot of hockey, and that is my escape. I also do some yoga, so there's high intensity and low intensity. But yeah, it's the same thing. You don't need to eat, sleep, breathe cyber. Again, if you there may be times where you're studying for
Yeah.
a certification or exam. I
Yeah.
mean, it ebbs and flows, but a balance is really what you need to have a sustaining and fulfilling career. Yeah.
And then, like Lisa said, build your network, right? So, um, I wouldn't have my job at BlackBerry if I hadn't built my network. I wouldn't have gotten my job at D2L when I went there. Arctic Wolf, um, I got that job because at that same Women in Security, or that same grade 9 event, the co-founder of Arctic Wolf, Kim Tremblay, was there, and we all had posters at this event. And then the grade 9 girls would move from table to table in groups of like 4 or 5, and we would tell them our story, and they would ask us questions, a little bit like speed dating. And you only had like 10 minutes with each set. And right before it started, I saw Kim's poster board and it said VP of R&D. And I ran over to her table before it started and I said, please don't leave right away after. I want to talk to you. I want to know how to get your job one day. I didn't literally mean her job one day. I mean, I did actually get her job one day, but I didn't actually literally mean it like that. I wanted to know how to become a VP as a woman in tech. And I had totally forgotten. I totally forgot I did that. And a few weeks later, I met with her and we were just talking about various things, and that conversation led into me interviewing for their role. So then like 3 years later, when she promoted me to VP, she told that story again, and I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot I did that. But it's so important, right? You building your network helps you meet many people, and it opens up doors. It just opens up so many doors. Lisa, you already like talked about that. And then this again, and we won't beat that one with a dead horse. So find leaders you're curious about and seek opportunities to learn and partner with them. I think that's a really, it's really interesting one. A lot of people are always saying, and this is the next line anyway, find role models and mentors. I will tell you that I did not ever really have a direct mentor. That wasn't necessarily like my boss or something like that. And I feel like sometimes women especially like really stress out about needing to find that perfect mentor, that one person. And what I really consider is that everybody who writes for Code Like a Girl is one of my mentors. They're my role models. A lot of the women I work with are my role models. If you find a great mentor, perfect. That's great. It can be very helpful. But if you can't, like, you can go and find the other leaders out. You can use stuff that they publish publicly to learn from them. Don't use that as a limiting factor. I don't know, Lisa, do you have any other comments or around any of these?
I have some additional ones,
Yeah,
things to
go
kind
ahead.
of make you stand out if you don't have a lot of the experience. Like we're looking for people with interest, analytical thinkers, inquisitive, like self-directed, You need to thrive in a high pressure environment and be a team player.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know from my perspective, I've had many role models and mentors, some informal, some more formal, but I never have one all-encompassing one. I usually have different mentors for different, kind of skills
Yeah.
or blind spots that I have, and that seems to have kind of served me quite well over the years. And then the last one is like focusing on the impact you want to make. I've had a lot of people say to me, listen, I don't have any formal experience. I've got all these other skills, but I'm really interested. So what can I do? I mean, Dinah, you talked about listening to podcasts and joining. I mean, we talked about joining clubs, CompTIA or meetups or WESIS. You can follow security vendors on social media. You can do like Arctic Wolf or Bleeping Computer or CISA.gov. There's conferences you can attend virtually that are no or low cost. And then if you don't have any hands-on experience and you're trying to kind of develop that, capture the flag events or try Hack Me or Hack the Box, build simple home programs. Like there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of get that experience if you don't have it. So that's all the items I wanted to add.
All right. So
Questions
our next slide is the question slide, but I also know we're 5 minutes over. So I'm not sure if we have time for questions or not. Okay. So I'm guessing we are wrapping it up. Thank you so much for joining us. Lisa, that was a blast. I knew this was going to be fun. I knew doing a talk with you was going to be amazing. And it was. And so I just want to thank CyberX for having us. Lisa, any closing words from you?
Thanks to everyone that came and listened. And please feel free to connect with Dinah and I on LinkedIn, on social media. Thank you, CyberX. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. We appreciate you.
Yeah. All right. Have a good International Women's Day.
Keep fighting the good fight.